In this lecture, I want to talk about the Generalate of Claude Aquaviva, which was a very important generalate in the history of the society, the early society. He is still to this day the longest serving superior general of the Society of Jesus. He was also incredibly young when he was elected superior general, at least being a superior general, and it was perhaps the height of Jesuit growth and kind of success, such as success can be measured for something like the Society of Jesus. And yet it was a time in which there were some problematic things as well. And in fact, in today's lecture, I want to talk about what I consider to be the most horrendously awful communal discernment in which the Society of Jesus has ever engaged. The communal discernment that happened at the Fifth General Congregation. And in that light, I want to talk about a rule for discernment that from the second week, the sixth rule, which says, when the enemy of our human nature has been perceived and recognized by his serpent's tail and the evil end to which he is leading, it then becomes profitable for the person he has tempted in this way to examine the whole train of good thoughts which the evil spirit brought to the soul. That is how they began, and how little by little the evil spirit endeavored to bring the soul down from the sweetness and spiritual joy in which it had been, and finally brought it to its own evil intention. The purpose is that through this experience now recognized and noted, the soul may guard itself in the future against these characteristic snares. I want to look first at this very terrible discernment I want to do what Ignatius suggests here. I want to look and see, how did the evil spirit ensnare us? Because I think in retrospect, I think all of you will agree with me. We were absolutely being guided by the evil spirit in this decision. And so I want to look at how that happened, because it wakes us up to how easily we can be blinded. And so should legitimately cause us to ask, what are the places where we are blind today? And can understanding how we were misled by our blindness in our discernment, even though they were good Jesuits with good intentions involved in this discernment, if we understand better how they were misled, maybe we can learn better not to be misled in our discernments today. And then we're going to look perhaps to see if there's a serpent's tail in any other aspects of Aquaviva's Generalate as well. So as I mentioned, Aquaviva was the longest serving general, the youngest general. He was 37 when he was elected general of the society, and he served 34 years. There's another general who served 34 years, but in case you're ever wondering, that on the Wikipedia page for Father Generals of the Society, someone has the exact number of days every general has ever served, including it has a ticker that goes up, an algorithm to bring up 1 day, every day 1 day for Father Sosa. So he served for 12,399 days, and the next longest general was Peter Jan Becks, who served for 12,267 days. He was also a general that had a lot of controversy. He twice needed general congregations to sort of ensure his continued leadership, because there was a lot of conflict in the society, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And there was also a period of tremendous growth. In 1581, when he became general, there were 5,165 Jesuits. In 1615, when he stopped being general, when he died, there were 13,112 Jesuits. There were 21 provinces when he started, 33 when he ended. 150 schools that the society was responsible for when he started, 370 schools at the end of his generalate. So this is a period of enormous growth. The General Congregation of Lexham, General Congregation 4, interestingly enough, is also the one that enshrines the decision of Borgia to increase the hour of prayer, to mandate the hour of prayer for all Jesuits, including the professed, which was against what Ignatius had wanted in this regard. And we're going to see this concern to mandate things, this concern to make rules clearer and firmer, is one that's going on in the society quite a bit. in the Generalate of Claude Aquaviva. And I'd like us to think about that and to contemplate that a little bit. But here's the thing. I want to talk a little bit, first of all, the main point that I want to make for the first part of the lecture is about the Fifth General Congregation, which happened in 1593. So let me tell you a little bit of the story of the Fifth General Congregation. There were some Spanish Jesuits who wanted to make some changes to the constitutions. So this whole thing starts with Jesuits who think the way that Jesuits are distinct, the way that we are different from other religious orders, is a problem. In my opinion, that is the first sign of the serpent's tail in this whole story. Now, there's other signs and worse things than that. But the first sign of something amiss is we're not good, is the thought, we're not good enough religious because we're not like other religious. That strikes me as a discernment that's rooted in fear. You can see if you agree with me. So they want to change the constitutions, and in particular, what they want to change the constitutions is they want to limit the power of the superior general. They want the superior general not to be able to elect provincials and rectors, select provincials and rectors. They want there to be chapters in communities with a rector and chapters in the province that are going to elect these superiors, like other religious. So they want less authority for the superior general. And of course, remember that the idea of the superior general's authority is not, yay, tyranny. We want, somebody in Rome telling us what to do. No, the idea is the general has the widest view of the society and therefore can look for the most universal good. And also, of course, remember that the whole basis of our government it's a spiritual governance rooted in personal relationships. It's not about who the majority of people want. It's about the person who knows, the superior who knows the person, who knows the interior life of the person, selects the right person to be a superior. So this is the idea. It's really kind of rooted in our desire to be universally available, and also rooted in our desire that our governance and our way of proceeding is personal and spiritual, as opposed to sort of corporate in that sense. So they want to change this, something pretty fundamental to how we are different from other religions, and also pretty fundamental to how we do what we do. This controversy, they make enough of a stink about this that Pope Sixtus V actually decides that he wants to have a visitor kind of go and look into the Spanish Jesuit situation, which Aquaviva doesn't want. Even though he's not happy with the objections to his rule, he doesn't want a bishop to be a visitor and look into this. So he actually argues with Sixtus, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine. And he finally convinces Sixtus to back down, although Sixtus is upset enough that he does ask that, okay, I won't send a visitor to investigate this, but I'm going to need you to change the name of the Society of Jesus, because it's disrespectful that you're called the Society of Jesus. And he requires Aquaviva to submit a formal request to change the name of the society. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I don't have it in my notes here, but I think Aquaviva wants to change to something like the Society of the Holy Name of Jesus or something like that. But echoing other times of controversy with other popes, we never had to make this change because Sixtus V died, and it was not something that was in writing. So we just sort of quietly moved on, because canonically, if it's not in writing, then it doesn't go on past the death of the Pope, the decree of the Pope. So another moment in that regard. It's kind of interesting. So in terms of Jesuit canonical fun, a phrase that I'm sure you use all the time, Jesuit canonical fun. It's, it just rolls off the tip of the tongue. Anyway, under the next Pope, Clement VIII, there's continuing to be agitations against the general in Spain. And finally, Clement VIII says, Father Aquaviva, you have to call a general congregation, because you have to settle this issue of this uprising against you, this disobedience, whatever you want to call it. And you have to decide, are you changing the constitutions? Are you dealing with these people? You got to deal with this unrest. So they have a general congregation 5. It's called 1593. But the thing that happens is none of the people that the malcontents who want to change the way the governance of society works and are opposed to Aquaviva's leadership, none of them are elected to the general congregation. So without any of them elected, Aquaviva's governance in the traditional way that the society is organized, everything's upheld at the general congregation. All changes to the institute are rejected, and the crisis is resolved. But there's a lot of ill will against these malcontents. There's a lot of ill will against these people who wanted to change the institute, and so they start looking at the lists of people who had signed these documents in Spain against the society's constitutions, and there's 27 people in the group who the General Congregation calls the authors of sedition and deceitful sons of our institute. So we start to see a little bit of anger creeping into this. Again, we're looking for the serpent's tail here. And then they decide to dismiss, the General Congregation decides to dismiss all 27 of these Jesuits. Which is pretty harsh, but then it gets worse. They determine, who knows how, because this is all based on, there's not much basis for any of this, these sorts of claims, but they determined that 25 of the 27 of these Jesuits were new Christians. Remember what a new Christian is. A new Christian is someone who is of Muslim or Jewish heritage, meaning technically that your grandparents would have to have been converts from, that if your parents or grandparents were converts from Judaism or Islam, then you would be technically a new Christian. This is this very racist, xenophobic movement that we want only Christians of pure blood. And there's been agitation in the Society of Jesus since the time of St. Ignatius that said that new Christians shouldn't be allowed in the Jesuits because they're not real Christians. And it's rooted in a terrible sort of racism more than anything else. Very clearly, St. Ignatius, in a letter that he wrote on April 5th, 1554 to the Provincial of Spain, stated, "And your reverence is advised that to be of the line of new Christians is not an impediment that excludes from entrance into the society." Ignatius was very clear about this. Ignatius said, no, this is ridiculous. You know, this is not a reason not to be a Jesuit. So that had been the practice of the society from the time of St. Ignatius, that you could be a new Christian and be a Jesuit. But they decided, who knows on what basis, that 25 of these people were new Christians. And on the basis of that, the following decree was issued at General Congregation 5. Those, however, who are descended from parents who are recent Christians have routinely been in the habit of inflicting a great deal of hindrance and harm on the society, as has become clear from our daily experience. The entire congregation then decided to decree, as is affirmed by this present decree, that in no case is anyone of this sort, that is to say, one of Hebrew or Saracen Muslim stock, henceforward to be admitted to the society. All people who were new Christians are banned from entrance to the society, and this decree remains in effect with some slight changes all the way until 1946. And if you're wondering why it changes in 1946, all you have to do is remember that this is right after the World War II, meaning it's only after the horrors of the Holocaust that the Society of Jesus finally comes to its senses and recognizes how awful this decree is. This is sort of the worst case scenario for communal discernment in the society. Racism, causes the society to abandon its practice and change its policies, and they kind of use the excuse of the fact that there's these malcontents in the society to let racism enter into how we decide who gets to be a Jesuit, who has a vocation to the Society of Jesus. I think the first serpent's tail is indeed the malcontents themselves objecting to the way the society is organized. But there's a second serpent's tail here, which is when we start, instead of being motivated by the gospel and by the true spirit of our institute, we're motivated by our prejudices and our fears. And we cloak those things in this sort of, we see the harm that they've done, and this is better for the Society of Jesus. We cloak these in pious pretense. And so we see how discontent at the Society's Institute and racism combined in this moment to lead to one of the worst, perhaps I think the worst communal discernment we ever made at a general congregation in the Society. An important one for us to realize, because it is one in which we were blinded by anger, blinded by the prejudices of the age, from seeing what the Spirit of God was really inviting us to at that moment. And in that case, Ignatius, who had his own prejudices and blindnesses, Ignatius had seen clearly, but we did not, which is ironic, because there's so much concern to stay true to Ignatius. But that's one of the things that's starting to change in the Generalate of Aquaviva, because more and more we're starting to think, well, we need to be more like other religious. We need to be as organized and clear in our legislation and in our style as other religious. And in that respect, I want to talk about two documents that came out during the Generalate of Aquaviva. I want to talk about the Ratio Studiorum and the Directory of the Exercises. The Ratio Studiorum, issued in 1599, was a plan for how Jesuit colleges were going to run. Jesuit colleges had become more and more important since Messina. Jesuit colleges had become sort of the preeminent work of the Society of Jesus. In fact, in 1560, Diego Lainez had decided that we were having such problems staffing all the probably too many colleges we were taking on, given our manpower resources, that Diego Lainez decides that everyone in formation, in the middle of their formation, should work at a college for a while, because the colleges are sort of one of the primary works of the Society of Jesus. This is the birth of Regency, this idea that during our formation we would work, and it's partly born out of the apostolic necessity of keeping our colleges running. Of course, obviously, the colleges are rooted in our identity as Jesuits, because educating youth and unlettered persons in Christianity and in the faith is part of who we are. But the specific idea of running colleges came about from the specific circumstances that we found in Messina and then other places, that this was a great apostolic opportunity. The colleges are such a great apostolic opportunity. We are able to help so many souls through that. They are so good for the Society of Jesus that our commitments to them grow and grow and grow. And one of the things that makes Jesuit education very unique at this period, aside from the fact that really nobody's running colleges like this at this point, other religions haven't gotten into the education business in the same way the Jesuits have, but we also create a network. This is not just a new thing, this idea that there would be networking, because through the way that the society is organized, where we have all these letters, all this communication that goes all around back to Rome and then all around the world and all these sorts of things, Jesuit schools in different parts of Europe and different parts of the world know what's going on in these other schools. They are sharing best practices. They are learning from each other how to educate. And so it's this great method of getting better and better at running these schools that are so important to the society's work. So all of this is the motivation for the creation of the Ratio Studiorum, which is basically a plan for how we're supposed to run our schools. What are we supposed to teach? How are the days supposed to be structured? What officials do we need? What are their responsibilities? All these different things. The thought is, well, we should have a document that decrees how every single Jesuit school is supposed to be run. And that's what the Ratio Studiorum is. A plan of studies for every Jesuit college. The question to ask is, did we need such a detailed, specific document determining what happened at every Jesuit college? Or is this a case of us trying to legislate rather than be open, available, and adaptable? Where's the line between sharing best practices and making sure that what's important to us in education gets done, and creating rules because we think, oh, we need to have rules, we need to have order, we need to have things be established? How do we stay true to the society's spirit of availability while also helping Jesuits who are in schools and running schools to do their work well? Is there a serpent's tail in the drive toward uniformity in the society, the drive toward unity in the society? Of course, we want to have a union of hearts and minds, as our documents say. We want to share with each other. We want to make sure that we are all engaged in the same endeavor as Jesuits. But is uniformity of practice the best policy? Or is this another way where we are kind of missing something about what makes us Jesuits in our availability and our adaptability? The same question of uniformity and unity comes in around the spiritual exercises. As I know you all realize, the spiritual exercises are themselves a guidebook to the retreat. They are not the exercise. The book is not the exercises. The experience we all have of making the exercises and of giving the exercises, that's the spiritual exercises. The book is a guide for the director. And not very long after the exercises start being practiced more widely, even in the life of St. Ignatius, there's a concern that we need a guidebook to the guidebook. We need a directory that's going to tell us how to direct the spiritual exercises, which is very meta, very strange, in my opinion. We need a book to guide us to how to use the guidebook for the exercises. Where is that desire coming from? This fear that this isn't enough, this guidebook didn't tell us enough. We need to know exactly how to do this. Well, what are Ignatius's exact instructions for the exercises? So slowly over the in the 16th century, culminating in 1599, there's this drive towards creating a directory, an official directory for the exercises, an official guidebook for the spiritual exercises. And under Aquaviva, just like the Ratio Studiorum, this directory comes out. And now we've got a uniform way to give the exercises. Now, the exercises themselves are a unifying principle for us as Jesuits, part of what makes us who we are. And they're a unifying principle in our works for all the various people we give them to. They're a hallmark of Jesuit spirituality and Jesuit ministry. But are they meant to be uniform? Do our schools need to be uniform? Do the exercises need to be uniform? Do we need these kind of guide rails? Is there a serpent's tail in all of this? That's the question. The question is this drive towards uniformity rooted in who we are as Jesuits? Or is this drive towards uniformity rooted in our fear that we're not like other religious? It's a question worth asking. It's a question worth exploring, because in its origins, our way of proceeding has this kind of fundamental adaptability built into it. But we got less flexible as time went along. And some of that's understandable. Some of it's understandable because we get worried about the adaptability. But the question is, was this good for the society? Now, so many good Jesuits, so many good things going on at this time in the society. This is not a question of the society's rack and ruin and evil and all these sorts of things. Rather, it's a question of what can we learn about the way that we make decisions as Jesuits from looking at the way that they made decisions at this time. Were they free or were they attached? That's the question. That's the question for us, is can we free ourselves from disordered attachments so that we're really looking towards God's greater glory and the good of God's people, and not toward assuaging our fears and trying to be like other religious or trying to be like other people. Points worth considering that I think this part of the history brings up for us. And so I leave those to you to consider and debate and reflect upon. Thank you.